Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast, YouTube blog, and internet radio station from Germany. Today, I do have the CEO of another German software company here with me. Hey, Domenico, how are you doing today?
I'm amazing, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing great, and we may tell our audience, most people would just listen to this interview, but we may tell those people, they can already tell from your background, it's dark outside. We've been pretty late for the recording, but nonetheless, we will do our best because for me, it's the last appointment of today. So we are doing good. As people already can tell, Domenico, you are an Italian guy and you grew up in Kiel, which is the most northern city in Germany. So it's almost Denmark. How was it?
Well, it's actually not so a couple of corrections. It's actually not completely true. I think the most northern city in Germany is probably Flensburg. So that's another 45 minutes up north. So I don't want to sort of forget them. And secondly, actually, you're right. I'm Italian, but I've actually taken on the German nationality about 2 years ago. I think a year and a half ago or something. So I've resisted for 41, 42 years or something, but I took on the German nationality as well. Can discuss that later for the reasons and so on. How was it? Look, I grew up in a super small town close to Kiel, actually half an hour of close to Kiel. So the next closest cities were actually Schleswig and Rendsburg. 5,000 people, very rural. My parents opened up, so I have a typical migration background. So my parents opened up an ice cream place there in 1977 or something, so 1977, 1978, selling ice cream to Germans. Realized pretty quickly that Germans don't eat a lot of ice cream when it's cold, so they also bought a pizza oven and pivoted, as we say in the tech world, pivoted from an ice cream place to a pizzeria and ice cream place, and so grew up in that family business. Super influential on myself and my later sort of development and career as well. And how did I grow up? Especially nowadays when you see kids in big cities and all of these perils that there are there and risks and everybody's concerned and so on, probably had the best childhood that anybody could imagine. No? So like super protected, good school, loving parents. So you couldn't, basically back then, the rule was, when the lights go on and it gets dark, then you get home and nobody was concerned about child safety or anything like that. So super happy childhood.
Sounds pretty good. And I also know that you did the thing that Germany and Italians have in common, which is also usually pretty divisive, playing football.
Yeah, so I think I started doing lots of sports when I was younger. I played tennis back in northern Germany. Everybody plays handball, so I played handball for quite a long time actually as well. I did some judo, but football was the one that I stuck with and played football. So in my hometown is Krop, so nobody's gonna know that, but played there. Then moved over to Schleswig, which was sort of the next big city. Played in close to Rendsburg as well. But basically, my peak of my professional career, it's actually not completely true, but was with Holstein Kiel. So I played in Holstein with Holstein Kiel for a couple of years, so that was the highest league in the youth back then. So which was the Regionalliga. So I played against teams like HSV and St. Pauli and Werder Bremen and Hannover 96 and so on. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, I was actually sold from Holstein Kiel to when I went to the seniors for 1,500. I think it must have been Deutschmarks, no? So $1,500 to the next club, and stayed there for another year. So that was my final year in school before I was going to move away. And then the year after, so after that final year back at home, I was actually sold for 4,000 Deutschmarks to the next club. So they made a good return on me. In that next club, I don't think that was a good investment for them. So the 4,000 Deutschmarks that they paid for me, because I hardly played. I started working. I had other things in mind, so not sure if they were incredibly happy with their investment. But yeah, I had a good time in Holstein and so on, and I played quite intensely actually until I was sort of 30, 32, 33, and then sort of injuries and other priorities and so on. So I stopped doing that, but I played football for a long time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's a very deep question here. You don't need to answer, but if Germany plays Italy in a matchup, what's your team?
That's an easy one. So I just said before, I took on the German nationality, but and you need to let me give the explanation for my answer so that people don't hate me. But basically, when I have two teams that I support, no, this is going to make me really, really unpopular with your listeners. I have two teams that I support. I support Italy and whoever plays against Germany. No, so and the reasoning for that is if you grow up in a small village in northern Germany, and you are literally the only Italian around for 50 kilometers, and Italy wasn't playing particularly well back then, if Italy was going to lose, next day in school, people were going to make hell. No, so they were going to pick on you, they were going to make fun of you, and so on. So my natural defense mechanism was to hope that Germany was going to do at least not as good as Italy, so worse than Italy. So even if we got kicked out pretty early in the World Cup, it was important that Germany got kicked out before, just so that people wouldn't make fun of me. And back then, sort of, Germany was pretty good and Italy was pretty bad. So that happened quite a lot. So and the interesting thing is, when I speak to my brother, it's exactly the same. So we have that in common. I have a younger brother who's 6 years younger. But actually, when I talk to my parents and I ask them, who do you support? They actually it's actually much harder for them, because they everything that they've achieved and accomplished in life, they credit Germany and sort of the situation that they found themselves in and the economic prosperity that they gained to Germany. So they're incredibly thankful. So am I, but I have this this issue with people were making fun of me if Italy was doing bad. So that's why I always supported Italy and whoever played against Germany.
I see. And then at one point you went to studies, and I've seen you also gotten around Montreal, WHU, Lancaster University, and you studied in a university in Italy. Can you take us just a tiny bit along this journey before we enter your professional journey?
Sure. So actually, before I went to university, I did a professional training at Deutsche Bank, an Ausbildung for 2 years, because I don't know. I had a girlfriend back then in Hamburg, so I thought I'd move out from home, and so I went to Hamburg. Pretty quickly realized, this professional training is all good and so on, but I wanna do something. I want to do something else. And I do remember, by the way, when I finished my Ausbildung and I got a job offer from Deutsche Bank, and I told my parents, hey, by the way, I'm not going to take this. And this was okay money back then, so I'm not going to take this. I'm going to go to university. Sort of a world fell apart for them, because this guy is a banker now, and why is he not taking the job? And so I wanted to go to university. I applied everywhere, and a friend of mine said, there's this open day at EBS back then. So we went there because you had a good reputation and so on. We went there. To be honest, I left that place pretty disappointed, to be honest, because I thought, and it's not because the place was not nice or the students that were not there were not nice, but I felt that there were quite a lot of people that I thought didn't have the substance, didn't have the substance that I was expecting. So we said, what, let's go. We also went to Maastricht. We also went to Wittenherdecke. But then we said, what, and we felt the same everywhere. So let's go to the WHU, because people thought that maybe that's at least back then that's a pretty decent university. So maybe we find better people there. And to be honest, I did feel that the picture there was different. I thought that there were we spoke to the existing students, and I thought that there were lots of really talented, smart people. So applied. I also applied for the Bucerius Law School, which was quite new back then. And then I had the privilege that I actually got offers, basically in all of the universities that I applied, and then took the WHU. And to be honest, a big discussion back home then was who's going to pay for that, because we didn't have the money to pay for it. But luckily, the WHO also has scholarships. And I got one of those scholarships. So I had the privilege of studying there. and actually not being required to pay for it. As a matter of fact, I actually got BAföG as well at the same time. And look, I very vividly remember, because you asked me, I got around quite a bit. I very vividly remember my life until then consisted in basically, until I was 10, I was allowed to play football, and then afterwards I started working. So I started first washing dishes at my parents' place, and then I started. At some point, my mom asked me, "Hey, now you're old enough. You can either work in the kitchen with your father, or you can be out here with me and be a waiter." And I said, "No, the kitchen with my father sounds boring, So I went sort of and becoming a waiter, and every vacation I had, every weekend I had, especially in the summer, while everybody else was traveling and was having fun, I literally was working. So I grew up with that sort of influence. So as a result, until I was 20 and left home, I've never seen any other country other than Germany, Italy, because we spent our winter vacation there, and Austria, because we were driving through that. Back then, nobody was flying or didn't have the money for flying. So we were driving through Austria in order to get to Italy. And that was basically my international exposure. So when I arrived at the WHO, and to me, this is probably one of the turning points, sort of, in my mindset at least. You get there, and everybody is talking about, you get there, everybody arrives, you get to know each other, and everybody's talking about, hey, where did you spend your summer? And there was the requirement that everybody needs to do an internship before joining the WHO. And then, Peter said, I spent my summer in New York at Morgan Stanley. And then there was Clarissa, and she spent her summer at L'Oreal in Paris. And the other guy worked at Goldman in New York. And then they asked me, and basically my response was, I spent my summer at the Kreissparkasse Schleswig-Flensburg in Kropp, sort of in that 5,000 population village. What I'm trying to convey is, when I got there and I saw all of these people and saw all of the things that they've done, it completely opened my mind and sort of, opened my view on the opportunities that are out there. So because if you grow up in your little bubble, you're not exposed to these sort of things. I didn't have anybody in my environment who was pointing me at these sort of things. And you get there and you meet all of these talented, super smart, super ambitious people, and they show you, this is possible, and this is possible, and this is possible. And so, as a consequence of that, I set myself the clear objective. I want to sort of catch up. So my first internship, I still remember, I applied for Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Australia. So the more exotic it was, the better it is. And I ended up in Jakarta. Absolutely loved it. And every opportunity along the way that I could spend abroad, I took. So I spent my first exchange semester in Rome, which might be an odd choice for an Italian. But to be honest, every time I go so my parents are from Sicily, or I was born in Sicily. Every time I go to Sicily, people thought of me as being the German. Every time I was in Germany, people thought of me as being the Italian. And I thought, I never lived in Italy other than on vacation. I wanted to have an Italian experience. So I went to Rome, and for the first time, I wasn't the German or the Italian. So at least in Rome, people were thinking, the guy talks a bit funny, but that's because he's from Sicily. So I was considered for the first time Italian. So I had the time of my life, really enjoyed it, and so on. So that was my first exchange semester. And then the second part, the WHO has these double degree programs for a number of people, and Lancaster was one of them. So I went to Lancaster with my best friend, who I'm sure we're going to talk about later on as well, and did an MBA there during my German diploma. And as it turned out, during that MBA, they had an exchange from the exchange. So, there was the opportunity to do an exchange trimester. And we applied for that, got in, and we went to Montreal there as well. So within those, that's what I'm saying. So WHO, everybody can have different opinions about it. I'm very positive about it, at least back then. But within those 4 years that I studied, I got my German diploma. I got my British MBA. I did 4 internships of a total of probably a year or even more. I spent a year and a half abroad, studying abroad. So in total, I've probably spent, a year and a half or so in Koblenz itself. And that's pretty cool to do all of that within 4 years. I always say, if people ask me, if anybody at the same time is able to study, in Cologne or Mannheim, which were amazing universities back then, I'm sure they are still today, and not do this in 4 years, but do in 5 years and get an exchange semester in and be able to do an internship as well, I rate this at least equally impressive as sort of being at the WHO. But it's a nice system that exposes you to lots of different influences, and basically it depends on you what you make out of it. But I was pretty happy, and I would back then I would have recommended it to anybody. To be honest, I'm not following it how it is today, but back then it made a big impact on my life.
Mm-hmm. I see. And then basically you did the usual thing. You went into consulting. I've seen that you spent time in New York as well as in Munich for BCG.
Yeah, so I to be honest, I ended up in consulting because I didn't know what to do. No, so I as you say, entrepreneurship back then wasn't a thing. No, it was at least not as prominent as it is today. I think half my year went into consulting. It seemed like the right thing to do. Back then, I was still pretty naive, and I ended up at BCG. Before that, actually, I took 6 months off and traveled the world a little bit, but ended up at BCG. And again, I wouldn't change it for anything. No? So the 4.5 years, 5 years that I spent there were amazing. The first project you start on the 1st of January, so you do the boot camp, all that fancy stuff. And then I was assigned to my first project, which was Adidas had just purchased Reebok. No? So there was a big merger back then. And I was part of the team who was helping with the post-merger integration, it's called, sort of to make sure that both companies are being combined properly, that there are synergies, that everything makes sense, and so on and so on. And there was about a year and a half. And as a result of within that project, I spent, 4 months in Italy, another 4 months in France. I spent 6 months in the UK, so pretty international. And that was a pretty good deal compared to, hanging out at some German bank in Frankfurt and live in a suit and tie, because I was running around in Adidas jeans and Adidas sneakers all the time. So I think it was pretty cool. And because of that, I think, and I must have done an okayish job. So I was I was always requested for consumer projects, and the same people asked to work with me and so on. So I did a project afterwards for another sporting goods company and another one. At some point, I think somebody in staffing said, hey, you know what? This guy is only doing the cool projects. He also needs to do something really, really not so cool. And I'd worked for Deutsche Bank for a project, and I worked for Allianz for another 9 months. But to be honest, I also like that. So I look at those times really well, really sort of with good memories. And then at BCG, there's this program which is called the ambassadorship program. So every year a couple of people are being selected based on different criteria, performance, and so on and so on, and are being sent abroad. And I remember very vividly that you need to put 5 choices, and I put New York on number 1. Chicago and Boston, maybe the other way around. Then I forgot what was 4th, Miami or something. And then I put 5th, I put Buenos Aires. And long story short, I got assigned to New York, and spent a year within that program in New York. And amazing, no? I mean, you spent a year working in New York, and people at BCG don't work as hard in New York as they do in Germany. So in Germany, I worked harder. So I had quite a lot of time. I had an amazing time there. I traveled the country, never been to the US before. So was really, really rewarding experience, to spend a year in New York and work on super interesting projects as well at the same time.
And at one point, you decided to leave consulting to go into different jobs, first as an investment professional, but then a very interesting stop as the CEO and managing director of Home24, also a company our regular listeners know a lot about because they have been quite frequently in the news. Actually, when I take my usual afternoon walk, I also walk by one of the central places you deliver here for this area, the furniture for that. So I also do have kind of a personal relationship to it. How did you end up being the CEO of this e-commerce company? How did you like it, and what did you learn?
So look, when I guess because of the WHO connection, I got in touch with the Samvars. They got in touch with me, And I think they were back then, it was the early days of Rocket Internet. And so, they were looking for people. And I guess they just called everybody at the WHU and discussed a few different things, didn't really like anything and so on. And at some point I said, this whole consulting and private equity sort of thing, that's all super interesting, but I want to do entrepreneurship. I want to sort of, be in that scene. That makes much more sense. And I went to Berlin, met a couple of people. I met with Zalando back then, a couple of other companies and so on. And one of the guys that I knew from my BCG time, I mentioned the Allianz project before, was Philipp Kreibohm, who I briefly overlapped with when I was at BCG. And we met. And he was pitching me Home24. Back then it was called FP Commerce, Felix Philipp Commerce. And it sounded like an amazing opportunity. So I joined. Back then I joined as, help me remember, as COO, CFO, head of ERP, head of IT. So, in other words, the company was super small. So everybody needed to do wear multiple hats. And secondly, those were the jobs that nobody else wanted. No, so everybody wanted to do marketing, everybody wanted to do sort of merchandising and assortment and customer acquisition and so on. But sort of the nitty gritty, processy, boring machine room stuff, engine room stuff in the background, systems and so on, nobody really wanted to do. So I joined when the company had sort of, literally no revenues. I don't know, 20, 30 people. I don't remember exactly. And in April 2011, I want to say. And well, to be honest, that first year until sort of the end of the year, that's probably one of the years that I'm most proud of in my professional career, not because of accomplishments, but because that wasn't an easy year. That was a pretty difficult year. And the fact that I didn't throw in the towel, the fact that I persisted, the fact that I sort of, got out the other end, against all odds, I was incredibly proud of that. So I stayed on. I remember my days. I got in the morning, and I'm pretty nerdy, structured guy. So I got my to-do list with my 10 things that I want to do for the day. And at the beginning, I ended the day with those 10 things still being on my to-do list. And I had another 10 things that were added during the day because you were in constant firefighting.
Sounds like my life.
Yeah, it's you're in constant firefighting mode, and everything is not working, and everybody's complaining. And, as the COO for an e-commerce company that grows 20, 30, 40% month over month, the only time people speak to you is when things are not working. So you're always got the I'm not sure what the language regulations are here on your podcast, but you're always in trouble. So, and look, sticking through that, building the team, getting the right people on board. And at some point, rather than being in constant firefighting and reaction mode, to go into a more proactive mode, going into a mode where you were not just thinking in hours, but you were starting to think in days and in weeks and in months and in quarters ahead, so that you could suddenly start shaping and creating rather than just repairing all the time. I think that was probably the sort of, the conclusion for that first year. I got really good people on board. And after about a year, I finally had the feeling, things are under control. I was then pretty quickly made MD. So together with the two founders, I was made the third MD. And then, I don't know, another year later, people asked me to become the CEO of the company and sort of, to take the overall responsibility. And I did this in total for 5 years. I think during my time, we grew the company from 20, 30 employees and literally no revenues to, close to 300 million euros in revenues. We were 1,300 people. We were in 8 countries on 2 continents. We were preparing for an IPO. So pretty intense, insightful learning experience that I sort of lots of the things that I've learned sort of stem from that time. I'm sure I would do things very differently now than we did back then. But it was a really cool ride within that sort of Berlin early stage startup e-com scene within Rocket Internet and sort of all of the companies that Zalando and Westwing and HelloFresh and so on, which all came out and about at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I see. And basically, what then happened? You had a few other positions, and at one point in maybe late 2022, somebody approached you, and in April 2023, you took over as the co-CEO of Xentral. It's spelled with an X, but actually it's called Xentral, I've been told. And who got you in the company, and what was your job? Or what is your job right now?
Yeah, maybe just because you say, I had a couple of different positions after that. So I went into private equity. I was in private equity before. I went into private equity again, both on the investment side and on the portfolio side. My point was I wanted to prove myself after I felt that I've proven myself sort of in the startup scene, that I also can function and work and operate in larger environments. So at some point I became COO for a company with 10,000 employees. I had personal responsibility for 2,500 people. It's a 10 billion euro company back then. It was super interesting. And again, the complete opposite of what I experienced at Home24, and I wanted to prove myself in that environment as well. There was a deliberate decision for me not to go back into that space afterwards. So I think I like much more where I'm now. But I wanted to prove it to myself that I can work in those environments as well. And I think because you went straight to 2022, we were living in London back then. We had a little one on the way. Brexit happened, COVID happened, so we decided, maybe London isn't the best place to sort of have a child. So we were starting to look around and ended up in Munich for YFood. YFood, super. I'm sure most of your listeners know it as well. Super interesting company. They just did their Series A, it must have been in April 2020. And they were looking for, at this time, so at Home24, I was the young guy. Now I was the sort of old gray-haired experienced guy, two younger founders. And I joined as third MD. And when I joined, the company was doing about, $1.5 million or so in terms of revenues, and sort of still very early stage. And within the 3 years that I stayed there, I think we completely revamped the company, really expanded into new markets, grew the revenues by factor 10, turned it profitable. So really big success story. And then a big share was sold to Nestlé. I think that's public information. And that was one of the reasons why we then parted ways. But again, super interesting story. And maybe that's a theme, when we come to talk later on about Xentral, that I've never had the courage or the bravery to found anything myself. So I think that's one of those things that I never got to do, at least until now, to do this myself. So I joined Home24 at a stage where the proof of concept was already there. The same for YFood. So lots of work had already been done. But I sort of enjoy those times, those periods, those phases where there's already something there, and then you take it from early stage product market fit and scale the companies up. So when it comes to taking the next 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, when it comes to professionalization, getting the right people on board, profitability, international expansion, strategic sort of articulation of where you want to go, operational execution. Those are sort of my bread and butter, both at Home24 and YFood, and also at what I'm doing now. So I left YFood and then joined Freigeist, actually, Freigeist Capital, which is an early stage deep tech VC. We invested into companies such as, what do people know, MyTaxi and Lilium and Ankerkraut and AirUp, and YFood was one of their investments, and Xentral as well. And I joined them as a partner. They're located in Bonn, but I'm the sort of the Munich dependance, if you want so. And started working there. I helped Kraftblock with a fundraise that they completed last year, so I think I was quite helpful there as well. And at some point, I think in which year are we now in 2024? So at the beginning of last year, Bene, the founder of Xentral, reached out to me and said, "Hey, you know what, Domenico told me about Xentral and the situation," and I obviously knew about Xentral already. And basically, long story short, Bene and Claudia, who've been building this company for an incredibly long time, really well, super bootstrapped, super commercially sort of astute, and really well. Amazing founder story if we have time to talk about it. But they realized, running a company with 20 people or running a company with 200 people, those are just two completely different animals, and they need help. And one thing led to the other. They said, are you interested? I obviously spoke to Freigeist and said, would you allow me, to do my Freigeist job and at the same time be co-CEO of Xentral for Freigeist, this is a super important investment. So they agreed. All of the other shareholders thought it's an amazing idea. And so I joined in March last year, so about a year ago, as co-CEO, formally being responsible for everything from commercial to customer success to finance, legal, people, strategy, and so on. And Bene sort of focusing on product and engineering. In reality, we don't really divide up like this, because at the end of the day, Bene is all over the place and I'm all over the place as well. And given that we are really well aligned, we are quite complementary, we think very much alike, that actually works really, really well. So, if you want to, we are both responsible for everything, and it has been working really well. So much so that originally my mandate, if you want so, was planned to end at the end of last year. So, it was time limited until the end of last year. But already after, in May or June or something, Bene approached me and said, "You know what, Domenico, you seem nicer than we thought, and a little bit less stupid than we were concerned of. Would you be interested in doing this a little bit longer?" No, and so the first time that I asked me in January to join on an interim basis, I said yes, because it's for Freigeist, it's a really important investment. So of course I try to help if I can. The second time they asked me sort of in May, June, if I wanted to do this for longer, I said yes, not because it's a really important investment for Freigeist, but because it's an absolute dream job. No? So Xentral, it's an amazing company, amazing market, really no competitor out there that we should be afraid of. Lots of white space, lots of really good ingredients. The product is good. We have lots of really talented people. We have the privilege that back from the funding round in 2020 and 2021, we still have an enormous amount of cash on the bank, so that we're not in any need of raising any funds anytime soon. So with all of those,
Tiger Global Management, Visionaries Club, Sequoia Capital, Freigeist, and HubSpot Ventures, you also have quite some interesting investor names.
Yeah. So I think we have an incredibly smart, talented, and supportive board as well. So I really thought, all of the ingredients are there, but somehow the company lost a little bit its way. There was a little bit of sort of this hyper growth, Wachstumsschmerzen, and I did feel that I had a pretty good plan on how to turn the company into a more successful path again. And so when they asked me, again, of course, I spoke to Freigeist, of course, we spoke to the other investors, but they said, you know what, this sounds actually like a really good idea. And so as of today, I'm doing both things. So I'm still a full-time partner at Freigeist, but I'm also full-time co-CEO at Xentral. And couldn't be happier. Last year was really, really intense. But very positive, and sort of the start into 2024 has been pretty positive as well. So really looking forward to, together with the team, together with the entire organization, together with all of our joint vision, and really revolutionizing the sort of the market for ERP for small and medium-sized companies, and really making a dent sort of in that market, and super excited about it.
Yeah, so the founder story, you elaborated a little bit before we started with the interview. We basically two people, they put together electronic components and they sold them. And they kind of, as a side gig, programmed their own ERP system, meaning for everybody who's not into B2B software. And there will only be few people out there. That's basically one of the systems that can run a whole company, including different modules like accounting, HR, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. So the picture maybe your listeners need to think of is you have Ben and Claudia, who are these sort of how do you call them, like MacGyvers, if you want. So like really, really creative inventor types. They were sitting on their sofa and basically putting electrical components together. And at some point they said, you know what? It's a lot of sort of manual work that we need to do for warehousing and printing out labels and shipping all of this stuff and sending invoices. There must be a more efficient way. Let's program the software. So Bene started programming the software, and at some, that software became better and better. And at some point, sort of, his friends and befriended companies and so on said, hey, you know what? The software seems to be cool. How are you guys doing it? Do you mind if we use it as well? And so they gave it away for free. And word of mouth happened. And at some point, people realized, oh, you know what? This electrical component selling, that's super nice. But that side gig, as you put it, that software sort of thing, that actually ended up being the main business. And so at some point they closed the electrical components business and really built out that software. And yeah, for everybody that is not aware of ERPs, so it's basically the complete back end of especially of trading companies. So from order to cash, procure to pay. So from your shops, offline, online, multi-channel into your commissioning engine, making sure that it being forwarded to the right warehouse, making sure that the carriers know it, printing out the labels, sending out the invoices, making sure that things are being paid, doing all of the accounting and all of that stuff. So that's all within the ERP. And Xentral has focused and is specialized on, obviously there are ERP solutions out there. There's an SAP and there's an Oracle and so on, but those are for large enterprise customers. And for sort of the small and medium-sized companies, sort of starting at €500,000, €1 million in revenues at the lower side, but up to 30, 40, 50 million. We also have customers which are significantly larger than that, but so 50, 60 million on the upper side. There isn't really any good solution out there that is sort of that's lean, that is fast to actually implement, that is also inexpensive, and that deals that has all of that flexibility that a modern ERP needs. It's completely cloud-based, so lots of APIs. So it's really a modern piece of software. And we see ourselves as, if you want, so I mentioned before, as the COO in at Home24. People always talk to you when things are going wrong. And so if you want, so the ERP is that silent, reliable, stable servant in the back room, so that your business is running and that you can focus on acquiring customers, on branding, on marketing, on customer acquisition, on finding new cool products and so on. So we really focus on being the backbone of all of our companies. And to be honest, we have about 2,000 customers in our midst. They make between 2 and 3 billion euros in revenues per year, and heavily growing. They employ somewhere between 20 and 25,000 people. So that's a big chunk of our German Mittelstand that we're supporting, and we're heavily growing. So it's an incredibly worthwhile pursuing mission that we're doing there, because we really see ourselves sort of as the back engine, as the engine room for that German Mittelstand, with a focus on trading companies. So to be clear, we focus on companies that either offline, online, multi-channel, doesn't really matter, but have physical products that they are trading. So, if you are a consulting agency or a podcaster and you're not selling anything physical, we're probably not the right solution for you. But whenever it comes to physical products, whether it's food, beverages, but even non-food, so, e-com, flowers, whatever it is, that's really what Xentral is designed for.
Yeah, you have fashion, food and drink, home and garden, and actual production here.
Fire extinguishers, watches. So it's really the whole bandwidth, as long as it is a physical product, so that it needs warehousing. So we don't do really digital products, but as long as it's a physical product, we're the place to be for all of those traders.
Do you have one? You don't need to name them, but do you have like one customer in mind where you thought, that is really a product that's interesting. Never thought about something like this.
Define sort of product that is interesting in terms of so that like an odd product, for instance.
Yeah, for example, that was completely new to you.
Well, look, I mean, we have the, without naming the names, but we are the ERP for the global market leader. When it comes, I mentioned fire extinguishers before. When it comes to all of those products that you need for firefighters, from the coats to the helmets to fire extinguishers and so on. So the global market leader for those sort of products runs on Xentral. But there are many more names that are sort of publicly available, from Coro and YFood and Robco. So a lot of really cool companies that are running on Xentral.
Mm-hmm. And you're basically there. When I talk to your colleagues, they said a few things about you. One of the first things they said, you're the zero bullshit guy. You're the person who takes a company from 10 to 100%. And of course, your job is focusing on recruiting. And besides that, execution. Is that about true? Is that what you would consider your job right now?
Well, just believe, sort of philosophy-wise, that the difficult thing in building a successful company is not necessarily having the idea. No, I think lots and lots of people have really, really good ideas. But the difference between sort of, building a successful company and bringing that idea to life and failing, from my perspective, is the execution part. No, so the getting an idea from idea to product market fit, you got to have the right instinct, you got to have the right intuition, you got to hustle, you got to have the courage to do it in the first place. You need a lot of luck as well. But then once you get to that point and sort of, you know it's working, but now it's all about how do you turn this into a really successful company. That's the part that I'm most interested in. So, I'm not sure if this is 10 to 100%, or, I think Peter Thiel talks about 0 to 1, and I talk about 1 to 10 or whatever it is. And that's sort of the phase that I'm most interested in. And if I look at the role of a CEO, sort of, in that time or in that phase, it's very, very different than, being a founder. So, I mentioned before, when I was at Home24, I had 2 founders. And at some point, I became the CEO. It's not because those guys were not brilliant. Quite the contrary. No, I don't want to say anything negative about them. They were the right people for the right time. But over the life cycle of a company, the skill sets that you're required to have for growing the company vary. And I might be the right person for the phase that we are in right now, but maybe in 3 years, so we reach a different stage, and then, I'm realistic enough to say, maybe then we need somebody else that takes the company forward as well. So I really believe into that any employee of a company sort of, needs to work in the best interest of the company, and if that means hiring people that are better than yourself and replacing yourself and sort of, handing on the baton to somebody else, I really believe that. And by the way, that's why my sort of partnership with Bene works so incredibly well. That guy is a founder through and through. The only thing that he cares about is the company. So he's very low ego. So it's all about company first. And the fact that he says, look, Domenico, I trust you. I'm happy with what you do. Just go and do it. Just do whatever you think is best. And I think that's an incredibly sort of complementary and fruitful sort of cooperation. I think it wouldn't work for founders to sort of, to transition and hand over some of the responsibility if there wouldn't be an enormous amount of trust, if there wouldn't be an enormous amount sort of, of low ego, and if there wouldn't be an enormous amount of, we are all acting in the company's best interest. If everybody's just sort of focused on their own personal agenda, then it's not going to work out. So, but to answer your question, so for that phase, how do I define basically the role of a CEO? No, so for me, the role of a CEO in that phase is to, how do I put it? To articulate a vision for the company and to set the ambition level. No, so a vision that everybody sort of thinks is worth pursuing, and sort of that vision and that ambition level obviously is not static, but constantly evolves. That's for me number one. Number one, if you have number two, so if you have that, then it's about putting a AAA team in place and setting those people up for success. Sort of mentor and develop them along the way, along the journey. Sort of develop them, give them feedback, and so on. But I always say sort of AAA people hire AAA people, so AAA B people hire C people. So you really need to hire people that are in every position that they are in, that they will be able to do the job better than you do it. If you think that you can do the job better than they do it, then they are the wrong. Then maybe you are how do you say it? You are unrealistic, or they are the wrong people. But put the people in place and set them up for success. The third thing is, and because I'm not completely about laissez-faire, so it's not you hire the right people and then you let them go. So you need to clearly assign accountability and instill a sense of ownership. So everybody needs to know, what are they responsible for? What do they own? What are the topics that they own? And we need to hold people accountable as well. So, and holding people accountable doesn't mean that it's always a complete disaster if targets are not missed. But it means we need to understand why that is. What can we learn from it? It's not about finger pointing and blaming. It's about what can we do better going forward. I'm sometimes being asked, how do I deal with mistakes and so on. So every day, I take 10 decisions and 5 of them are wrong and 5 are right. But of the 5 that are wrong, we correct them tomorrow because we figure it out quite quickly. But making mistakes in a fast-paced environment and in this environment that we are working in, that's totally normal. And actually, if we wouldn't be making any mistakes, it would probably be an alarming signal, because it means that we're not taking enough risks. So once you clearly assign accountability, then I would say is sort of, determine the boundary conditions, if you want to. So, what are people allowed to do within their jobs versus not? That sounds quite strict, but what do I mean with that? So I just hired a new VP commercial for Xentral who started on Friday. And obviously, it's very clear what he's responsible for and so on. But if he now were to get the idea, I'm now moving out of the small and medium-sized enterprise segment, small and medium-sized companies segment, and I want to go into large enterprises, that's in conflict with our vision. No? So that's, unfortunately, Moritz is his name. I would say that's not what we want. We can obviously discuss it and so on, but we are focused and we are exclusively focused on the small and medium-sized companies. So you need to make sure that there are certain parameters and boundary conditions that people are aware of, which they know, these are basically lines that cannot be crossed. Then sort of, with all of that set up, you act as an overall synchronizer to make sure that teams are working towards the same goals. I don't think that there's anything more powerful than sort of, having 200 people all working towards the same goals rather than 100 going left and 100 right. And at the end, you're not moving forward. You are, as a CEO, you are acting as a catalyst, as an accelerator, as a problem solver when sort of, the organizational processes that you set up fail. And finally, I guess sort of, there's the cultural element as well. So, you define the culture of the company, you lead by example, you focus on communications, you're being transparent with the organization. So that's really the from my perspective, the role of the CEO as I live it. No, and what comes through there is, I don't have time for bullshit. No, so it's all about what is that saying? If you have data, then data wins. But if all that we have is opinions, then mine wins. No, because I need to look at data. I need to see well-reasoned arguments why we should be doing things. But so don't have time for anything other than that. Execution. I really believe that execution is the difference between sort of failing and being successful. I really believe that execution is that difference maker, that differentiator. And what else did you say? So zero, so 10 to 100 and zero bullshit. What else did you say?
Mm-hmm. And execution. Yeah. We already talked about, plus hiring. And usually I close with those questions, but right now it's pretty obvious that you're looking for people. We talked before, you're not necessarily looking for fundraising, but everybody who would be curious what jobs are at offer right now, they could go down here in the show notes. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this somewhere, there's a link to our blog post, and in our blog post that you'll have a link to the career website of Xentral.
Yeah, look, let me maybe before we go into the jobs comment on. So I don't want to convey the picture that it's all about execution. So I'm sure once we are in better waters, I also like strategizing and thinking about whatever we wanted to do next, internationalization. But I think you got to earn that privilege first. So you got to bring your house in order. And I think that 2023 for us was really that. We've invested heavily into people, teams, structures, processes, and so on, to heavily improve our customer satisfaction, to really improve our processes, to help customers get to value much, much faster. So I think you got to earn that. I hate it when people come to me and, in recruiting processes and you ask them, what do you like? And they say strategy. I don't know what strategy is. It's for me, it's all about, setting yourself objectives and then making sure that you translate or that you define actionable interim steps in order to get to that point. So that's maybe comment number one. Comment number two, recruiting. I interview everybody in the company. So everybody that we are currently hiring at some point during the process comes to me, not because I have the final say. I think that's really, really important. I always say this to my teams. The final say is with the hiring manager, but I'd like to get a good feeling of what are the profiles that we are hiring, what is the attitude, what's the culture, and so on. And typically, if I don't like somebody, the feedback that I provide to the hiring manager is, look, Peter, I have this concern. I'm a bit unsure about this. I'm not certain about this. It's your call. But and recruiting is like so many things. It's never certainty. So you're talking about probabilities here. So, but I say, I'm not sure if there's a high probability that person is going to be successful, and then it's the hiring manager's decision to say, you know what, I see it differently. I still want to hire that person and so on. But I do interview everybody because I really like to get a good feeling and give that feedback as well. And so when you ask about open positions, look, we grew by, I think 30% in our teams last year. We probably have ambitions to grow even more this year. So we're probably looking for 30, 40, 50 people that we want to add to the team this year. So maybe it would be too far-fetched to talk about those individual positions right now. But for anybody that wants to be part of a team that in 3-4 years from now, wants to be at the next whatever summer party or Christmas party with me and say, do you remember back then on the 6th of March, 2024, and look what we've accomplished together? We really made a dent into this, market for small and medium-sized companies for complex products. Anybody that is sort of inspired by that, anybody that wants to be part of the journey, anybody that wants to be part of a winning team, is welcome to sort of reach out. We always need talented, young, smart people that sort of want to have an impact on this journey.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you already have something like 2,000 clients in terms of SME companies here in Germany. According to the German Statistics Office, there are 3.15 million small and medium-sized enterprises. So
there are a few left for us. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, there's still room to grow for you guys. I wish you best of luck for that. And hopefully we talk soon when you guys have made the next step, because we are already talking about double the length of a usual podcast recording here on Startuprad.io. Domenico, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I think that is still proof that you do have a lot of Italian genes in you.
No, absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. If we're already talking twice the length, I'm also speaking twice as fast as most people. So, we did 4 times the content. So that's what I mean with efficiency and execution. Thank you so much for having me, and really enjoyed this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.